Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to module number 3. The section that we're going to be covering in module 3 is actually the second section for 8th grade standards, and that is a changing society. And the time frame that we're going to look at here with a changing society is the late 19th century, so after Reconstruction. We'll go back just a little bit before the Civil War and kind of look at some things here and there. We're actually going to do that with this section and the next section as well. But we're going to get into also into the early 20th century, and this section will kind of run concurrently with the next section, module 4, which is expansion and imperialism. They'll kind of run together, but we're looking at different concepts in either. So changing society, where we'll look at industrialization and immigration. Okay, we started to see near the end of Reconstruction and near the end of the Civil War and into Reconstruction, we started to see kind of a dismantling of the agricultural based economy in the South and moving more towards an industrialized South. The North was already industrialized and will industrialize further in the 19th century. And this age of industrialization, or this industrial revolution, actually begins at the end of the 18th century, okay, early America, and throughout the 19th century into the 20th century. We'll see it continue to grow. Immigration is going to just explode in the United States during the late 19th century into the 20th century. Okay, so the essential questions, these are questions that you should be able to answer following this section. Number 1, what new problems and opportunities developed as America became an industrial power? Number 2, how did the Gilded Age describe the economic and social conditions that existed in the late 1800s? And we'll actually talk about what the Gilded Age means. This time frame that we're discussing, the late 19th century, early 20th century, is actually referred to as the Gilded Age. And why do some people describe the United States as a melting pot? How does that view of American immigration differ from what some historians have called the tall salad view of American immigration? Okay, so two opposing views or different views on immigration. They both agree that immigration exploded during this time, but they have differing viewpoints of how to analogize that immigration in America. All right. So people of the Gilded Age, and really this is a misnamed slide, and I should probably go back and correct it, but it's people and vocabulary, okay? So not just people, okay, because we're going to define Gilded Age. That's not a people. And specific people, like a robber baron is not any one individual. It could be a title for a number of people who fit that description. Lewis Latimer, African-American inventor who played an important role in improving practical electrical lighting. Thomas Edison, inventor of the electric light bulb, at least the one that was safe to use indoors, and many other inventions. Alexander Graham Bell, inventor of the telephone. John D. Rockefeller, founder of the Standard Oil Trust. A robber baron, as I said earlier, is a business leader who becomes wealthy through dishonest methods. Andrew Carnegie built the U.S. steel industry. And the Gilded Age, that's this period of time, the late 1800s era of wealth and prosperity. Okay, so new inventions change American life, and this happens pretty substantially during the late 19th century. And these are just 4 of the main inventions. There were a lot of inventions during this time. This was the age of invention, really. You have the electric light bulb, the typewriter, the sewing machine, and the telephone. We're going to look at how these inventions impacted American life. The Industrial Revolution, which we already referred to before, was the major technological, socioeconomic, and cultural change in the late 18th and early 19th century, resulting from the replacement of an economy based on manual labor. Remember that manual labor, but also as a part of that, a major component of that manual labor was slave labor. So slavery is abolished. You got to move on from that. So the Industrial Revolution marks that transition. And this one is one dominated by industry and machine manufacture. There were many factors that caused industrial growth in the United States after the Civil War. Okay, these reasons are a growing population. The U.S. population more than doubled in about a 25-year period. Doubled. Over 14 million immigrants were part of this growth. Natural resources. The U.S. was able to use its vast resources, forests, water, coal, iron, copper, silver, and gold. And those things helped the United States to grow industrially. Government support. State and federal governments use land grants, subsidies, and tariffs to help businesses grow. This is one of the main reasons why there were so many inventions, is because the government was kind of helping it along, like giving grants to people who wanted to invent stuff, providing the means by which to test these new inventions, these new products out, and also providing money for the production of these things to sell. Okay, the manufacturing of these inventions. Investment capital, hoping to, so it wasn't only the government investing in the economy. Banks and wealthy people were lending these businesses money, lending these inventors money, and hoping to get a return on their investment. And in a lot of ways, they did. They were able to capitalize on their investments. Okay. Further reasons for growth: new inventions. Industries were able to produce goods more efficiently with new machines and processes. So these machines were created. These new processes were created. Not just machines, but ways of doing things as well were invented during this time, and this helped to increase productivity in creating these products. Okay. Improved transportation. Not only the manufacturing part of it with the new inventions helped to make the process more efficient, but transporting and distributing the goods across the country. One of the major impediments to growth in the United States prior to this time was just the sheer size of the United States. The United States is a big country, and before these improvements in transportation, it was difficult to go from one side of the country to the other. Okay, you have the Transcontinental Railroad that's going to come about. That's going to connect east and west from the Mississippi out to California, and that Transcontinental Railroad is going to connect the two. Okay, that's going to come about during this time period. You're going to have the Panama Canal. Okay, so if you want to ship things using waterways, okay, from the East Coast to the West Coast, there's no easy way about it. Okay, you can't just sail over there. You have to either sail down around South America up to the other side, or really there's no way to sail north. Okay, those are treacherous waters up there, so you don't want to do that. Okay. So the Panama Canal is created, and that cuts that shipping time in half, because now those ships can go this way and then cross through the Panama Canal and into the Pacific Ocean around to the Pacific side, the Pacific coast. Okay, so big difference. Steamboats on the rivers, especially the Mississippi and some of those larger rivers, were utilized more effectively. So transportation was improved. All right, so Edison and electricity. The electric power industry grew tremendously during the late 1800s. So prior to the incandescent light, prior to central electricity, people would work during daylight hours. If they were reading or working at night, they had to have candles, okay, which candles don't necessarily exhibit a whole lot of, or have a whole lot of light associated with them, or they don't give off a whole lot of light. So people aren't productive workers at night. Okay, so this is one of the reasons why we had daylight savings time, is because it would help with productivity, help to increase the amount of daylight time to in order to work. So with electricity and Edison creating a light bulb, now you have indoor lighting. You can now have a third shift, or second and a third shift really, and work late into the night. These warehouses, these factories were able to stay open later, increasing their productivity. Thomas Edison invented many new ways to use electricity, including light bulbs that were safe for home use. He did not actually invent the light bulb itself. He invented the incandescent light bulb that was safe for homes. All right, so he also invented a system to deliver electricity to buildings. By 1882, he had installed the first permanent commercial central power system in New York City. This was big for businesses, and this tremendously increased productivity. Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone in 1876. He figured out how to make the receiver work by accident. The story goes, he was working on it. His wife was in the house doing, just the odd chores and jobs around the house, and she was in the room that the other receiver was in while he was working on one of them, and he was frustrated. He couldn't seem to get it to work, and he's talking, he's expressing his frustrations, and she's on the other side of the house, and she can actually hear him talking through the receiver, and she picks it up and says, and calls out his name, and he's like, "Eureka, it works," and so that was it. He discovered completely by accident the telephone, or he didn't discover it by accident, okay? He figured out how to make it work by accident. He was already working on it. That was no accident, okay? By 1880, more than 50,000 telephones had been sold. So invents it in 1876. Within 4 years, he is mass producing it and selling it. The invention of the switchboard allowed more people to connect to a telephone network. All right, sorry about the bell. That interrupts us. So there'll be another one in 5 minutes, so just hold tight. Okay. So the switchboard, and this was the way that these telephones in the houses, in the shops or whatever, were connected, the switchboard. Okay, each community had one, each small community had one. There were ones that connected communities, and then ones that connected communities or states or other governments or whatever across the nation. Okay, and the switchboard was a way to connect people. Okay, this is like the precursor to the internet. We're connected internationally via the internet, and with the switchboard, this was kind of the first step in that progression. Okay. So in the beginning, a customer would make a phone call by calling the switchboard operator. So let's say Billy Bob wants to call Sally Sue, okay, and Billy Bob picks up the receiver. I'm going to use picks up the receiver and says, and the switchboard operator will say, okay, how may I direct your call? This is the switchboard operator. Billy Bob will say, I want to talk to Sally Sue, and gives the operator the number or whatever. So the switchboard operator will say, hold on just a second, and we'll disconnect. Well, first of all, when Billy Bob picks up the receiver, the operator sees the light flashing at Billy Bob's port. You have all of these little ports around, and you plug in the plug to the port, and that's how you connect. Okay, so switchboard operator sees that the light is flashing and will plug in her receiver to Billy Bob's port and she'll say, switchboard operator, how may I direct your call? He says, I need to talk to Sally Sue. So she says, hold on just a second. She then unplugs from Billy Bob's port and then plugs into Sally Sue's port and says, Sally Sue, Billy Bob would like to talk to you. Sally Sue says, yes, I'll talk to Billy Bob. So then she says, hold on just a moment. She unplugs from there and then plugs a connecting wire into both of their ports, okay? And then allows them to speak, okay? And then they can talk that way. Let's say Billy Bob does the same thing and the operator connects to Sally Sue, and then Sally Sue says, no, I don't want to talk to Billy Bob. He's a loser. So she will let Billy Bob know she's not available right now, and, that kind of thing. Call back later, or, whatever. So that's how the switchboard works. The switchboard operator was a new job that was created to run the switchboard during this time. So with these new inventions, new jobs came about, okay? All right, so inventions and women's jobs. And most of these, or a lot of these inventions, created new means of employment for women, okay? And which seems at first as not really a big thing. Yeah, it's more employment for women. These jobs have to be filled. Somebody has to do them. And women oftentimes would get into these jobs. But it really is going to have a profound impact on the United States and the growth of the United States, okay, societally, okay. What it does for women is it increases their ability or their independence, their level of independence. Okay, so it increased women's independence, and eventually there's going to be a push for further independence, and especially with women's suffrage or the women's right to vote, okay? The switchboard was a big one. Usually the switchboard operator was a woman. The typewriter as well, it was invented during this time. Most secretarial jobs were done by women. The sewing machine, also, most sewing was done by women. Okay, so these are three big inventions during this time that open up jobs and employment for women. Okay, so the sewing machine. The invention of the sewing machine changed the lives of Americans, as did a lot of these inventions. Factories began producing ready-made clothes in standard size. Prior to this, you couldn't just go to the shop down the street. You couldn't just go to Target or to your nearest clothing store and pick out an outfit and then go home and then wear it. You would have to go to a tailor, and they would size you up and they would create your clothes. Okay, they would sew your clothing and then stitch your clothing, and then you have to come pick it up like a few weeks later. Okay, with the sewing machine, standard size clothing was created and was then sold in the shop. So you would go to the shop and you would buy your clothes. Okay, I mean, of course, even today there are tailors, so you can still have your clothes tailored, and I would actually say it's probably better, because they can get your exact fit. But the sewing machine helped to provide standard clothing for people. Okay. So how do you think, just to yourself, how do you think these new inventions changed Americans' lives? Okay. All right. Next part we're going to talk about is corporations and how corporations gain power. Before the late 1800s, most businesses were owned by a single person or by a few partners. During the Industrial Revolution, many businesses turned into corporations. Okay, so most family-owned businesses were going on before this. So you had family-owned businesses. And now, these businesses are creating corporations, which is a business owned by shareholders. Shareholders are investors who own part of a company by buying shares of that company stock. Now we know about the stock market. We know stock market is a thing that's still around today, okay? And it's these corporations, they sell parts of their stock, and this is going to help them down the road. Okay, so this is a way for them to raise money to reinvest into their business. Okay. All right, corporations, these are some advantages to corporations. They can raise large sums of money by selling stocks. They can limit the risk of its shareholders. Okay, so people who buy into the stocks, they buy the stocks. Since they don't own the entire company, if something bad happens to the company, they're not devastated. Now, they may lose some, but they only lose a small fraction because they only own part of it. A corporation continues to exist even after its founders die. Okay, like a corporation like Walmart. Okay, so you have Walmart, and the founder of Walmart, he died, and when he died, Walmart continues to live on. It continues to exist after his death. I think it was maybe 30 years ago that he died. Okay, Sam Walton. Okay, corporations are better able to run large operations such as the Standard Oil Refinery. Okay, it's not just one local business, but it's a business that's able to have different sections, different parts of the process of manufacturing all over the place. Okay, distribution centers and manufacturing centers and places where they can sell their products. Okay. John D. Rockefeller in the oil industry. All right, so John D. Rockefeller in the oil industry. He's best known for his strategy for success. He believed that the best way to make money was to put his competitors out of business. And a company who wipes out its competition, who controls the industry, like controls all aspects of the industry, one industry, that's called a monopoly. Not the board game, although the board game is based on that concept, that you wipe out your competition, the last person to win, the last person still with money is the monopoly and wins the game. Okay, so it's the same thing here, except Rockefeller did it in real life with the oil industry. He began to buy other oil refineries, and he made secret deals with other railroads to carry his oil at a cheaper rate than other refineries. He was able to make more profit. Okay, and a lot of big corporations do this. They're able to mass produce their products, and then in that mass production, they're able to sell their products for a cheaper price and undercut the competition. And who's going to want to go and buy a product that's more expensive than another company, especially if the product that they provide is not only cheaper, but of better quality? All right, so he also developed a trust. And a trust is a legal body created to hold stocks in many companies, often in the same industry. So if you have one oil company and you have a few other oil companies that are corporations, so he would develop this trust, okay, and this trust, funded by him, would go and buy stocks in these other oil companies. And when they got to the point to where they had more than a 50% share, they got the control, or they had the majority share, the controlling share in that company, then those trusts, the group that own the shares in that company, would sell the company. And who would buy it? Rockefeller. He would buy the companies and would kind of just merge them into his own oil trust, his own oil industry. Okay, by 1880, he controlled 95% of all oil refining in the United States, and he was able to set his own prices for oil. And in those cases, they were high prices, and that made him even more money. Consumers had to pay Standard Oil's high prices because they couldn't buy oil from anyone else. Rockefeller was known as a robber baron. This is a business leader who becomes wealthy through dishonest methods. Andrew Carnegie and the steel industry. So Rockefeller's known for the oil industry. Carnegie is known for the steel industry. Andrew Carnegie had a different idea about how to make his corporation a success. He believed that to beat his competition, he simply had to produce the best and cheapest product. He wasn't as cutthroat as Rockefeller was when it came to business. To do this, he wanted to control all processes of the manufacturing of steel. He bought the iron mines as well as the ships and the railroads that carried iron to his mills. Okay, not just one piece like Rockefeller was in the refining business. Carnegie was in every piece of the operation, not just the manufacturing and the distribution of the steel, but also the mines and even the railroads that shipped the iron to the mills. Carnegie was the U.S.'s largest producer of steel until he sold his corporation to J.P. Morgan, a leading banker, for $480 million. And in that time, $480 million was a lot of money. That's a lot of money now. That was really a lot of money in the 19th century. Carnegie first earned a reputation as a generous employer and a friend of the workers. He supported the rights of workers to organize and form unions. And that's not common in these days, or in those days. This limits his power. He allows them to have unions and to organize into unions. He did, however, give his partner the power to reduce the workers' wages when the economy weakened. This caused riots that led to 10 deaths and the destruction of the labor union. When all of this happened, he actually wasn't even there. He allowed his partner, he gave him the authority to do these things while he went on vacation, and his partner, when Carnegie was on vacation, did that. Okay, and his role in it was unclear. Did he give him this power and go on vacation to save his own name, but with the understanding that he was going to allow this to happen? But after this, his reputation was never the same. Okay, both of them were philanthropists, and a philanthropist is a person who donates money to charity. Okay, they donated large sums of money to charity, which sounds great. Look, these guys are giving to charity, and the charities certainly were happy that they were benefiting from these donations. Rockefeller donated money to the University of Chicago and Rockefeller University in New York. In his lifetime, he donated more than $550 million. Carnegie donated money to several hospitals and built many libraries. In his lifetime, he donated about $350 million. And again, this sounds great that they're donating to charities. But there was an ulterior motive as well. Like this helps they are able to write off this money on their taxes, so they don't have to pay as much taxes to the government in giving. Okay, so it's helpful to them. So economic growth brings wealth, but it also brings poverty. We start to see the difference, a large discrepancy between the people who have money and the people who do not, and that wealth gap increases significantly here. Industrialization raised the living standards for everyone, okay, but more so for people who were wealthy and the business owners. Okay, the wealthy flaunted their riches by buying mansions and other luxuries. The problem was that the Industrial Revolution did not do much to help minorities, factory workers, and many people living in the South. This wealth gap increased. So the people who had the money had more money. The people who did not have the money had less, and the difference was glaring. Okay, and this is where the name Gilded Age comes from. Something that is gilded. You take something that is not really worth a whole lot, and then you coat it in something that is worth a whole lot. So you take something like a cheap metal and you coat it in gold, so it's gilded. it's gold coated. Okay, so you could have a piece of rubbish that's coated in gold, so it looks like it has more value than it actually does. The Gilded Age became known as the era of fabulous wealth, but underneath that wealth, there was a segment of the population that was very poor and in poverty. So the meaning behind this, just like the gold can disguise an object of lesser value, those who were rich and flaunting their riches overshadowed many other societal problems like corruption in politics and widespread poverty. Industrialization changes cities. During the Industrial Revolution, many people moved to large cities to find jobs. Factories began to open in large cities with good transportation systems and plenty of people to work. The more factories opened, the more people moved to the cities to fill the jobs. Okay, so you start to see the urbanization of America, where before cities, they were populated, but they weren't really populated the same way as the rural areas. A lot of people lived like on farms and outside of the city. Because that's where the work was. The cities were just a different type of thing. So as industrialization happens, urbanization also happens, and cities get packed with people. Other things that made urbanization possible was the invention of the electric elevator. Okay, so prior to the invention of the electric elevator, most of the buildings were no more than 4 stories high, and they were spread out, which took up more ground space. Okay, but with the invention of the elevator, buildings started being built narrower and taller. So you could have 40, 50 story high buildings, an elevator that would take people from the bottom to the top. Okay, and what this did is it allowed more buildings to be built in a smaller confined area. So cities were able to grow. More people could live in a smaller area. Because of this, population grew within the cities, and population density increased. That means more people per a defined area. So more people per square mile increased because of this urbanization. Before this invention, most buildings were under 4 stories. People did not want to have to take the stairs to the 23rd floor. After the invention of the elevators, people began building skyscrapers, which increased the housing and workspace available in cities. All right, so I had to pause because you noisy bunch of hooligans out in the hallway. All right. So urbanization, there you go, skyscrapers right there. The elevator created skyscrapers, or led to the creation of skyscrapers. And there you go. All right, so the streetcar and suburbanizations. We talk about urbanization, and that is the growth, the tremendous growth of population in cities. Okay, but the cities became so overcrowded, and then people wanted to move outside of the cities to more residential type places that aren't as urbanized as the cities, and the tenements, and we're going to talk about tenements and slums later on when we get into immigration and all that stuff. But they also didn't want it to be so far outside of the city that like they couldn't work. They came to the cities for work. Okay. So they had to find some place that was kind of in the middle, that had the elements of elements of the urban work environment, or they could get to the cities for work, but also with some elements of the rural areas, the farming, and that's what they liked as far as living. So then you have the suburbs, okay? And the invention that helped to increase suburbanization was the streetcar. The invention of the streetcar made transportation easier, and people were able to live farther away from large cities. They could still work in the city and not live in the city. Suburbs, they are the residential area lying immediately outside a city. So you here over on this map, you have Chicago. So you have the Chicago South Side, and you have the suburbs outside, and you see some of the streetcar lines that would take people out to this area. Okay. All right. So that's where we're going to leave off. How did industry and new inventions change society? So that's something for you to think about. And I also want you to think about what were the inventions that had the greatest impact on American society and life. And industry and new inventions changed American society because many factories opened in large cities, which made cities grow, and this caused urbanization. Electric elevator led to skyscrapers. Things you can think about. Streetcars led to suburbanization. And that's where we're going to leave off for Lesson 1. Thank you.